The plan on Somaliland is a long-term one in parts of the Republican Party, and one of the nominees that might become Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Peter Pham, has been very vocal on recognition of Somaliland. So it is a possibility. Under Trump 1, we saw the recognition of Western Sahara as part of Morocco, for example, and you had that kind of, the Abraham's, kind of process with Morocco involved in that. And so it is possible, it's very plausible that Washington might recognize Somaliland. I was in Washington myself a couple of weeks ago, and talking to people around the Trump administration at that time, they were like, well, there's already been plenty of fragmentation in the Horn of Africa, so let's just recognize it. They were referring to the creation of South Sudan, the independence of Eritrea. My worry is that there's a lot of fragility in the Horn, and other regions might then decide that they also want to become separatist and push, and so that could, as you've alluded to, create a greater problem. So, there are significant risks also to go ahead and recognize Somaliland.
If the war ends, that perhaps the prices of commodities and materials, would it go down?
So I think in terms of grain and fertilizer and energy costs, I think we'll see that. I think you'll see the freeing up of certain types of foreign direct investment into Africa. The Russians will certainly be a lot more aggressive. My view is that we'll see a lot more Russia in Africa, not less Russia in Africa after an agreement. The Ukrainians, because of the war, have discovered Africa. They were completely absent before the war. And so there'll be a little bit of Ukrainian activity, I think, in terms of some of their offers on the continent. They've opened a sway of embassies and have been looking at where they can have business ties. My biggest concern will be actually the Trump administration, and goes back to your previous question to me. Will it be more involved on the African continent or less involved? I don't think the president himself cares at all about the African continent. I mean, he has made some statements around South Africa in his first month in office, or his first couple of months. But I do think that the issue that rises is if the US disengages further from the African continent, that will provide a vacuum for competitors and adversaries of the United States, as well as kind of allies, the traditional allies who are unsure of their position now, with some of the statements coming out of Washington to look at the African continent and partnerships. The one thing I think that will be forensically watched by Washington from a Trump administration perspective is what China's doing on the African continent. And the one other thing that Africa offers is critical and strategic minerals. And so I think that's still a driver. I mean, you can see how important that is in the narrative related to Ukraine this week. Well, the scale of critical and strategic minerals in Africa is massively more than what Ukraine can offer. And so I think that will be an area of focus for the Trump administration.
Yeah, because if there's a deal to be made in Africa, and that's, of course, China's there, Russia's there, the U.S. is there, but like you said, whether or not Trump will get more involved, but it would seem like that he would want to be more involved just because of China and Russia's presence and the value of all the minerals that are there.
Yes, I mean, I think that's exactly right, Phil. So I do think that's going to be a key element to US policy. And actually, maybe it's not a bad thing that the president himself isn't particularly interested in Africa, which means that there'll be, traditionally there's more continuity between Republican and Democrat administrations on Africa. There's kind of been a consistency. I mean, the big rupture that's happened over the last 2 months is the rowing back of international development aid. So, the potential closure or the closure of USAID and all the debate that has obviously rightly created. But in terms of trade and investment and some of the other things, there could be just more consistency than change, actually, which was what we saw in the first version of the Trump administration.